Don't you dare. His voice, sharp with indignation, sliced through the quiet hum of the office. You don't get to take credit for Eleanor's work again. I recognized Dan Carter's righteous anger booming from the main conference room, the one usually reserved for client presentations. My steps faltered just outside the slightly ajar door. I stood frozen for a moment, the thick stack of Keystone Logistics analytical data clutched tightly to my chest, feeling that familiar, unwelcome knot of anxiety tighten low in my stomach. It was happening again. You have no idea what you're talking about, Carter, Victoria Sinclair replied, her voice a stark contrast, smooth, controlled, and eerily calm. Like ice slowly forming on water. That composure always unnerved me more than shouting ever could. I've been carefully cultivating the Keystone relationship for months now. A blatant lie, but delivered with utter conviction. Eleanor is simply executing the strategy one laid out. Taking a slow, deliberate breath to steady my nerves, I pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped inside. Both heads snapped towards me. Dan, my loyal teammate for the past few years, stood flushed, his usually neat tie askew and his blazer, always looking slightly rumpled no matter how new, bunched at his shoulders. Opposite him stood Victoria Sinclair, our recently appointed VP of Global Accounts, flown in from the West Coast like some kind of corporate royalty. She was immaculate, as always, in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my entire monthly mortgage payment on my modest Columbus condo. Her Stanford MBA practically radiated off her. Eleanor, perfect timing, Dan said, a wave of palpable relief washing over his tense features. He gestured towards Victoria, his frustration still simmering. Tell Victoria who actually developed the core strategy for the Keystone SCO suite. I paused, collecting myself before speaking. My name is Eleanor Vance. It felt necessary to state it, a small anchor in the churning uncertainty. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 6 years, I've dedicated myself to climbing the ladder here at Zenith Systems in Columbus, Ohio. We develop and implement sophisticated supply chain optimization suites, the SCO suite, as we call it. It's not glamorous tech, not like the social media apps or flashy gadgets. But it's the essential digital infrastructure that keeps goods moving efficiently across the country, the unseen engine of commerce. I started as a junior account executive, fresh out of Midwest State University with a business degree clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I worked my way up to senior account manager through sheer grit, relentless hours, and consistently exceeding my targets. My MSU diploma hangs in my functional, standard-issue cubicle, a stark contrast to the Ivy League credentials flaunted by many of our executives. A fact Victoria never missed an opportunity to subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, remind me of. Ah, Eleanor, Victoria said smoothly, turning her attention to me as though Dan hadn't just been openly accusing her moments before. Her smile was perfectly polished, but it never quite reached her cool blue eyes. We were just discussing the Keystone presentation. I'll need all your updated notes and projections by the end of the day so I can finalize everything before the signing next week. She spoke as if my role was merely supportive, administrative. I met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice even. Actually, Victoria, the presentation is already finalized. The entire SCO suite proposal is built around the customized, multi-phase implementation plan I developed specifically to address Keystone's complex multimodal logistics needs. I spent months analyzing their pain points and tailoring our solution. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. Well, naturally, I'll need to review it thoroughly myself, she replied, the implication clear. My work needed her superior oversight. We absolutely cannot risk losing this deal. It would be our largest contract ever, $40 million over 4 years. I nodded curtly, maintaining eye contact. I'm fully aware of what's at stake, Victoria. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say in front of her, was the sheer volume of effort poured into securing Keystone Logistics. It had consumed nearly a year of my professional life. Countless early mornings fueled by lukewarm coffee, late nights staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. Weekend work sessions mapping out intricate supply chain workflows, all dedicated to deeply understanding Keystone's operational challenges, crafting the perfect, scalable SCO suite solution, and, crucially, building genuine trust with their executive team, especially their CEO. I'd flown to their headquarters in Chicago 4 separate times, each trip involving intense preparation and high-stakes presentations. Each visit inching me closer to closing this potentially career-defining deal for Zenith. As Dan and I walked back towards the relative anonymity of our cubicle cluster, the tension slowly eased from his shoulders, replaced by a weary frustration. He shook his head, running a hand through his already messy hair. "She's going to try and push you out of that final signing meeting next week, Eleanor." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "You know that, right? She wants to be the one holding the pen, taking the photo op with their CEO." I let out a long, slow sigh, the weight of the internal politics settling heavily upon me. It was exhausting. "Let her try, Dan. Jessica Morales won't sign anything unless I'm physically in that room." What Victoria didn't know, what nobody at Zenith Systems knew, not even our CEO, Mr. Hayes, was the personal connection underpinning this entire negotiation. Jessica Morales, the dynamic CEO of Keystone Logistics, had been my roommate back at Midwest State University. We'd shared a ridiculously cramped, drafty off-campus apartment for 2 intense years, surviving on instant ramen, cheap beer, and sheer willpower as we navigated exams, part-time jobs, and uncertain futures together. We still met for brunch whenever her business brought her through Columbus. Of course, I hadn't leveraged our friendship improperly to get the deal. That would have been deeply unprofessional and unethical, undermining everything I believed in about earning business through merit. But knowing Jessica personally, understanding her values and her vision for Keystone, had certainly helped get my foot in the door initially and build a level of trust that went beyond a typical vendor-client relationship. As I settled back at my desk, trying to refocus on the remaining tasks for the day, a new email popped up in my inbox. The sender, Preston Hayes, CEO. The subject, executive meeting tomorrow. A sudden chill, cold and unwelcome, traced its way down my spine. My intuition screamed that this wasn't about a commendation for the Keystone progress. Something felt off. The executive boardroom on the top floor always made me profoundly uncomfortable. It was a world away from the functional beige of the sales floor. Everything up there was too polished, too perfect, too expensive. The gleaming, dark wood table reflected the recessed lighting like dark water. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Columbus, a view meant to impress and intimidate. Even the air smelled different, a sterile mix of lemon polish and undeniable power. I smoothed down the lapels of my best department store blazer, feeling acutely out of place, and took a seat at the far end of the massive table. As usual, I was painfully aware of being the only person in the room whose degree didn't come with an Ivy League brand name attached. Our CEO, Preston Hayes, sat at the head of the table, a man in his late 50s who had inherited a solid company but lacked visionary spark. His expression was, as usual, unreadable behind expensive, steel-rimmed glasses. Victoria sat immediately to his right, looking perfectly composed, a sleek leather portfolio open in front of her. 3 other executives filled the remaining seats, all men, all clad in nearly identical, impeccably tailored navy suits, the uniform of the Zenith upper echelon. "Eleanor, thank you for joining us," Mr. Hayes began, his voice smooth but lacking warmth. He gestured vaguely towards Victoria. "Victoria tells me you've made significant progress nurturing the relationship with Keystone Logistics." I nodded, forcing myself to meet his gaze as I pulled out my own meticulously organized notes. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. We're in the final stages." They verbally committed to the full SCO suite package during my last visit to Chicago. We were scheduled to finalize and sign the contract next week. $40 million over 4 years, with a strong option to renew. Mr. Hayes leaned forward slightly, steepling his fingers in a gesture I recognized as his serious business pose. "That's excellent work, Eleanor. Excellent. It would be, by far, the largest single contract in Zenith's history." A small, defiant flutter of pride warmed my chest despite the unnerving atmosphere. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's been a significant team effort, of course, but yes, I'm very proud of where we've managed to land with Keystone." "The thing is, Eleanor," Victoria interjected smoothly, cutting me off before I could elaborate. Her tone was perfectly reasonable, almost helpful, but the underlying message was sharp. "We have some strategic concerns about Keystone's enterprise-level needs moving forward." I frowned, confused. But I've built the entire proposal around scaling to their enterprise infrastructure, Victoria. The multi-phase implementation plan directly addresses every single concern their IT department raised during our deep dive sessions. I have documentation confirming their satisfaction with the technical roadmap. It's not just about the technical specifications, Eleanor, Victoria continued, her voice still deceptively gentle. She glanced towards Mr. Hayes, seeking affirmation. It's about the ongoing relationship management. A client of this magnitude, this visibility, requires a certain level of finesse, a touch of sophistication at the highest levels. My stomach plummeted. The familiar cold dread washed over me. I'd seen this maneuver before, more times than I cared to count. Victoria positioning herself to swoop in and take over lucrative accounts right at the finish line. After I or someone else had done all the grueling groundwork, relationship building, and complex solution design. But never with a client this significant, this transformative for the company. I've been personally managing the relationship with Keystone for nearly a year, I stated carefully, choosing my words with precision. Fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. Jessica, Ms. Morales, has specifically requested that I personally oversee the initial implementation phase. Victoria's smile returned, but it was brittle, tight, and didn't reach her eyes in the slightest. Of course, Eleanor. You've done absolutely excellent foundational work. Her praise felt condescending, dismissive. No one is disputing your contribution to getting us this far, but they were. Oh, they absolutely were disputing it, or at least diminishing it to the point of irrelevance. I could see it in the subtle, knowing glances exchanged between the other executives, in the almost imperceptible way Mr. Hayes shifted his gaze. Avoiding direct eye contact with me. We simply need to ensure this flagship account receives our most experienced, high-caliber talent moving forward, Victoria continued. Her voice resonating with false authority. Therefore, I will be taking point on the final negotiations and the official contract signing next week. The air seemed to thicken in the room. 6 years. 6 years of unwavering loyalty, countless sacrificed weekends and evenings, the biggest, most complex deal in the company's history, meticulously built and now nearly closed, and they were calmly, deliberately pushing me aside right at the finish line. The unfairness of it stung, sharp and bitter. Is there a specific concern with my performance, Mr. Hayes? I asked directly, my voice colder than I intended, locking my gaze onto his. He finally looked directly at me, though his eyes shifted uncomfortably after a moment. Not at all, Eleanor. Not at all. His reassurance felt hollow, scripted. You've consistently exceeded expectations in your role. But, he paused, clearing his throat, as Zenith continues to grow and pursue larger enterprise clients. We need to carefully consider the image we project. Frankly, we need the proper pedigree representing us at that level. He gestured towards Victoria again. Victoria brings experience with major Fortune 500 accounts, and frankly, an educational background from Stanford, that you simply don't possess. What he didn't explicitly spell out, but what hung thick and heavy in the air between us, was the unspoken hierarchy. Victoria had the Stanford MBA, the polished veneer, the presumed connections in all the right, lofty places. I had my Midwest State University diploma, a stack of proven results, and a deep understanding of the client's actual needs. Somehow, in this room, tangible results weren't enough anymore. Pedigree trumped performance. The following week passed in a miserable blur of forced smiles and simmering resentment. I spent hours meticulously handing over all my Keystone files to Victoria, walking her through every nuance of the relationship. Every technical detail, every potential pitfall I'd anticipated. I briefed her exhaustively on every key conversation I'd had with Jessica Morales and her team over the past year. I even, swallowing my pride, drafted detailed talking points for her to use during the final signing meeting, the meeting I was now barred from attending. I performed every task asked of me with absolute professional courtesy, keeping my frustration carefully masked. Even as a corrosive blend of anger and humiliation burned deep in my chest. Then, on Friday afternoon, with the crucial Keystone contract signing scheduled for Monday morning in Chicago, another calendar invitation materialized from Mr. Hayes. Another executive meeting. This time, ominously, the head of HR was copied. My heart sank like a stone. I knew, with sickening certainty, what was coming. Yet, it still felt like a brutal shock, like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head, when I walked into the small, sterile meeting room, not the main boardroom this time, and saw the plain manila folder sitting starkly on the table in front of the chair designated for me. Eleanor, thank you for your many contributions to Zenith Systems over the years, Mr. Hayes began, his corporate mask firmly, impersonally in place. He avoided my eyes, focusing somewhere over my left shoulder. As you know, we are constantly evaluating our organizational structure to ensure we are optimally positioned for the next phase of strategic growth and enhanced market perception. I remained silent, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, waiting for the inevitable euphemism. Let him say the words. The head of HR, a woman I'd barely interacted with during my entire 6 years at Zenith, sat beside him, her expression neutral, detached. Victoria, notably, was absent. She'd delivered the killing blow in the boardroom last week. She didn't need to witness the disposal. We've made the difficult decision to restructure the account management department, effective immediately, he continued, his voice flat, devoid of any genuine emotion. Unfortunately, as part of this strategic realignment, your senior account manager position has been eliminated. The words hung there, cold and clinical, in the quiet room. Eliminated. 6 years of my life, my dedication, my results, all discarded, dismissed with a single, sterile corporate euphemism. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside me. I lifted my chin slightly. May I ask why this decision is being implemented now? Literally days before Zenith is scheduled to close the largest contract in its history, a contract I personally secured? Mr. Hayes finally met my gaze, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. This decision is not about the Keystone deal, Eleanor, he replied, though the lie was transparent to everyone in the room. This is purely about our long-term strategic direction. Our need to elevate the team's overall credentials as we pursue more high-profile, enterprise-level clients. You mean, I said, the bitterness finally seeping into my voice, sharp and undisguised, you need people with fancier diplomas? His expression tightened, his lips thinning into a hard line. We need people with elite educational backgrounds and proven enterprise experience moving forward, Eleanor. His eyes flickered, almost involuntarily, towards where my MSU diploma usually hung in my cubicle, now packed away in the cardboard box sitting ignominiously at my feet next to the chair. He didn't even have the decency to pretend otherwise anymore. Your foundational work, stemming from your time at MSU, has certainly been adequate for a certain level, he added, twisting the knife with faint praise. But Keystone requires a different caliber of representation now. The HR head leaned forward then, sliding the manila folder across the table towards me. Her voice was robotic, reciting from a script. Zenith Systems is prepared to offer a severance package in line with statutory requirements, 2 weeks' pay, continuation of basic health benefits through the end of the month, and a standard letter confirming employment dates. It was the bare minimum. Legally compliant, but insulting. How thoughtful, I replied, the sarcasm thick in my throat. I could feel my face flushing, a hot wave of anger and profound humiliation washing over me. 6 years of dedication, 6 years of exceeding expectations, 6 years of putting Zenith first, all distilled into this paltry, dismissive goodbye package. All the necessary details and release forms are contained within this folder, the HR woman continued, oblivious or indifferent to the impact of her words. We will require your employee badge and company-issued laptop before you vacate the premises today. I looked from Mr. Hayes's carefully neutral face to the HR director's impassive one, searching desperately for a single shred of genuine regret. A hint of appreciation for the value I had brought, for the massive deal I had landed on their behalf. There was nothing, just the awkward discomfort of an unpleasant task completed, and perhaps, a subtle eagerness to move on, to get me out of the building. Thank you for the opportunity, I finally managed to say, the words feeling like ashes in my mouth. I pushed back my chair and stood up, gathering my coat and the humiliating box containing 6 years of my professional life with as much dignity as I could possibly muster. No shouting, no pleading, no tears. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I simply took the thin manila folder, gave a curt, formal nod, turned my back on them, and walked out of the room, out of the job. out of the company I had poured my heart and soul into. As I methodically packed the last remaining personal items from my cubicle, the framed photo of my parents, a collection of well-used industry reference books, the MSU diploma carefully wrapped in tissue paper, Dan hovered nearby, his face a mask of shared outrage and helpless sympathy. "This is completely insane, Eleanor," he whispered furiously, glancing nervously over his shoulder towards the executive offices. "Absolutely unbelievable. After everything you've done for this place. Especially after landing Keystone." I carefully placed the wrapped diploma into the box, smoothing the tissue paper. "It's fine, Dan. Honestly." A strange, unexpected calm was settling over me, pushing through the initial shock and devastation. "It is not fine," he hissed, his fists clenched at his sides. "You landed Zenith a $40 million deal, the biggest in its history, and they fire you literally days before the ink is dry. It's disgusting. You should fight this. Go to a lawyer." I looked up at him then, meeting his worried eyes, and allowed myself a small, knowing smile. The calm wasn't resignation, it was something else entirely. "Number one, Dan," I said softly but firmly, "they've clearly made their choice about the kind of company they want to be. And number two," I paused, leaning in slightly, "come Monday morning, they're going to realize, very, very painfully, that it was the absolute wrong one." Dan's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" I smiled again as I picked up the now sealed box. "Just wait and see. Monday morning, 9:30 a.m. Instead of being on a plane to Chicago or pacing nervously outside a Zenith conference room, I was sitting in my own apartment, curled up on the sofa in comfortable yoga pants, nursing a second cup of strong coffee, and half-heartedly scrolling through online job listings. My phone, resting on the coffee table, suddenly lit up with a text message. It was from Jessica. "About to head into the Lion's Den here at Zenith HQ for the signing. Seriously wish you were here, Ellie. Feels weird doing this final step without you. Brunch this weekend to celebrate properly?" A genuine smile touched my lips as I typed back a quick reply. "Absolutely. Can't wait. Am dead today. Call me right after it's done." What Jessica didn't know, what I hadn't brought myself to tell her during our brief catch-up call over the weekend, was that I wouldn't be in that meeting. I wouldn't be anywhere near Zenith Systems ever again. I had deliberately, perhaps calculatingly, omitted any mention of my sudden termination. Some might call it manipulative, a setup. I preferred to think of it as simply allowing events to unfold naturally, letting Zenith experience the direct consequences of their own elitist decision-making. My phone buzzed again almost immediately with Jessica's enthusiastic reply, "Of course. Counting on it. Can't wait to finally get this SCO suite implementation rolling with you leading the charge." I set my phone back down, the screen dark, trying to ignore the tight, complicated knot twisting in my stomach. A small part of me felt a pang of guilt for not giving Jessica a heads up, for potentially putting her in an awkward position. But a much larger, angrier, more wounded part of me desperately wanted Mr. Hayes and Victoria Sinclair to experience the full, unmitigated fallout of their arrogance and disrespect firsthand. Across town, in the gleaming, sterile Zenith Systems executive conference room, I could picture the scene perfectly. Victoria would be meticulously arranging presentation binders and ensuring the expensive pens were perfectly aligned, basking in the glow of what she believed was her imminent triumph. Mr. Hayes would likely be there early too, adjusting his tie, ready to take the lion's share of the credit for landing this landmark acquisition. They'd be exchanging self-congratulatory smiles, radiating confidence, utterly, blissfully unaware of the Category 5 hurricane named Jessica Morales heading straight for their meticulously constructed world. My phone erupted with a ringtone at precisely 10:15 a.m. Caller ID, Dan Carter. "Eleanor," he practically shouted the moment I answered, his voice a breathless mix of shock and exhilaration. "Oh my God, Eleanor. You are not going to believe what just happened here." I took a slow sip of my coffee, a flicker of grim satisfaction warming me. "Try me, Dan," I replied calmly, setting the mug down carefully on its coaster. "Okay, so Jessica Morales walked into the main conference room right on time, powerful presence, totally commanding. She took one look around the room, at Mr. Hayes, at Victoria, at the other suits, and the very first words out of her mouth were, 'Where's Ellie?' Just like that. Where's Ellie? I closed my eyes, savoring the image, picturing the carefully arranged scene instantly dissolving into chaos. What did Victoria do? I asked, keeping my voice even. Victoria immediately jumped in, all smooth and corporate speak, trying to explain that you were, no longer affiliated with Zenith Systems. And that she was now the designated lead for the Keystone account. But Ms. Morales just cut her right off, mid-sentence. Dan's voice rose with excitement. She looked straight at Hayes and said, "And I wrote this down, Eleanor, I actually wrote it down," she said, "Mr. Hayes. I believe I made it explicitly clear during our negotiations that Eleanor Vance's continued direct involvement in overseeing the implementation of this SCO suite was a non-negotiable prerequisite for Keystone Logistics signing this contract. If Eleanor's not involved, then we need to revisit this entire agreement immediately. This deal, as it stands, is off the table." I couldn't suppress a small, vindictive smile. "Oh, Jessica. My fiercely loyal, brilliant friend. What did Mr. Hayes do?" I prompted. He started backpedaling instantly. "Major damage control mode." Dan snorted derisively. Started spewing corporate jargon about team approaches, synergistic transitions, how much they valued your past contributions. "But we're strategically evolving, complete bull, Eleanor," you could smell it across the room. Ms. Morales wasn't having any of it. She just stood there, arms crossed, looking completely unimpressed. She reiterated that you, Eleanor Vance, were the primary reason Keystone was even considering Zenith Systems in the first place. She said, and I quote again, "Without Eleanor's expertise and the trust she personally built with my team, this deal needs a fundamental reevaluation from our side." A potent wave of satisfaction washed over me. Imagining the look on Victoria Sinclair's perfectly made-up face as her stolen victory disintegrated into dust right before her eyes. "So, then what happened?" I asked, eager for the next installment. "Total chaos," Dan reported gleefully. "They're all huddled in Mr. Hayes' office right now. Doors closed, but you can practically feel the panic radiating out here. It's absolute pandemonium, Eleanor." Victoria looked like she was about to have a full-blown meltdown. Last I heard, she was frantically calling the legal department, trying to see if there was any possible way to force Keystone to honor the verbal agreement based on prior emails or something. "There isn't," I stated simply, confidently. The final contract was the only binding document, and it was contingent on my presence. I had made absolutely certain of that loophole during the negotiation phase, anticipating potential interference. There was a brief pause on Dan's end. How did you know this was going to happen, Eleanor?" he asked, a note of genuine awe creeping into his voice. "How did you predict this so perfectly?" I hesitated for a moment, then decided Dan, my loyal ally through so much office turmoil, deserved the full truth. Jessica Morales was my college roommate at MSU. We've been close friends for over a decade. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. And Zenith Systems had absolutely no idea? Dan finally breathed, the awe now mixed with disbelief. "They never bothered to ask." My voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "They saw my state school diploma from MSU, made assumptions about my background, and figured I couldn't possibly have any valuable connections beyond mid-level managers. Their elitism blinded them." "So," Dan asked, the practical question cutting through the drama, "what happens now?" It was the $1 million, or rather, the $40 million, question. The one I'd been wrestling with all weekend, oscillating between righteous anger and professional pragmatism. Part of me, the wounded part, wanted nothing more than to sit back and watch Zenith Systems implode spectacularly without the Keystone deal. A just punishment for their arrogance. Another part, the seasoned professional who had poured 6 years of her life into building relationships and expertise within this industry, couldn't entirely abandon ship, even one she'd been thrown overboard from. "That," I replied honestly, gazing out my apartment window at the Columbus skyline, "depends entirely on what Mr. Hayes and Victoria decide to do next." I didn't have to wait very long to find out. Within the hour, my personal cell phone, usually quiet during work hours, began blowing up like a fireworks finale. 3 missed calls from Victoria Sinclair, each presumably more frantic than the last. 2 missed calls from Preston Hayes himself. A curt text message from an unknown number that, after a quick search, turned out to belong to the head of HR, all vibrating with increasing levels of barely concealed panic and forced, insincere politeness. Voicemails started piling up. I let them stew in their self-inflicted crisis for another full hour, letting the pressure build, before finally deciding to answer Mr. Hayes's fourth desperate call. "Eleanor," he said, the relief flooding his voice so thick it was almost tangible. "Thank goodness I reached you. We need to talk." "I'm listening, Mr. Hayes," I replied, deliberately keeping my tone cool, neutral, professional. Let him sweat. "There seems to have been a significant misunderstanding this morning with Keystone Logistics." He sounded strained, unnatural. "Ms. Morales is under the distinct impression that your personal involvement is somehow essential to the finalization of the deal." "That's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Hayes," I corrected him calmly, firmly. "That is a fact. Jessica Morales made my continued oversight of the implementation an explicit condition of the agreement. I documented this requirement clearly." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. Dead air thick with unspoken recriminations and desperate calculations. I could almost visualize Mr. Hayes in his ridiculously large office, removing his expensive glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose, his telltale sign of extreme stress when negotiations weren't going his way. "Perhaps," he finally said, his voice tight, strained, forcing the words out, "perhaps we acted hastily on Friday regarding your employment status. We would like to discuss the possibility of bringing you back immediately to oversee the Keystone implementation and salvage this critical contract." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, sharp bark of incredulous, bitter laughter escaped me before I could stop it. "Let me get this straight, Mr. Hayes." My voice dripped with ice. "You fired me, eliminated my position, less than 72 hours ago. Explicitly because my MSU degree wasn't prestigious enough for your company's image. And now, purely because you're about to lose a $40 million contract that I secured, you suddenly want me back? Is that the gist of it?" "That's not he began, attempting to interrupt, to spin, but I cut him off sharply. "It is exactly what happened, Mr. Hayes." My voice rose, fueled by righteous anger. "Let's not insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." Another long, tense pause crackled over the line. I waited, letting the silence stretch, letting him absorb the full weight of his predicament. "What?" he finally asked, his voice low, stripped of its usual executive bluster. "What would it take, Eleanor? What would it take for you to come back and salvage this deal for Zenith?" I had spent a significant portion of the weekend contemplating this very question, running through various scenarios in my mind. Initially, fueled by raw hurt and burning anger, I'd fantasized about demanding an outrageous salary, Victoria's job title, a corner office, public apologies broadcast throughout the company. Vengeful, satisfying fantasies. But as the initial, intense sting of betrayal began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard clarity, I realized something crucial. I didn't want to return to Zenith Systems. I didn't want to work for a company, for a leader, who had discarded me so callously, so disrespectfully. The moment my perceived lack of pedigree became inconvenient, no amount of money, no fancy title, could ever repair that fundamentally broken trust. "Nothing, Mr. Hayes," I replied simply, calmly. "There are no terms under which I would return. I am not interested in coming back to Zenith Systems." He sounded genuinely taken aback. "Everyone has a price, Eleanor," he insisted, falling back on the cynical transactional worldview he understood. "Name yours." "A vice president title," he offered, grasping at straws. "Significant equity in the company?" "Both." "We can make it happen." "This isn't about money or titles, Mr. Hayes," I repeated firmly, my resolve solidifying with each word. "This is about respect. Professional respect. Basic human decency. You and Victoria showed me exactly how much you value my contributions, my skills, my worth, on Friday afternoon. That demonstration was quite sufficient. I admit," he conceded, his voice tight with frustration, "we may have handled the transition poorly. Transition." I interrupted again, my voice rising sharply despite my best efforts to remain calm. The sheer audacity of the word infuriated me. "You fired me, Mr. Hayes. days before closing the single biggest deal in Zenith's entire history. Because my diploma didn't have enough ivy growing on it. That's not a transition. My voice trembled slightly with suppressed rage. That's blatant, unapologetic elitism, plain and simple. And I refuse to be subjected to it any longer. The line went completely quiet again. Utter silence, except for the faint sound of his breathing. When Mr. Hayes finally spoke again, his voice had lost all its executive polish. It sounded thin, reedy, almost desperate. Jessica Morales is threatening to walk away completely. We are talking about $40 million, Eleanor. $40 million. The board is convening for an emergency meeting this afternoon. My job is likely on the line here. Well, I replied, my voice regaining its cool composure. That sounds like a significant problem for you and Victoria to solve together. Perhaps your combined elite degrees can figure a way out of this mess. Please, he said, the word barely a whisper, and I was genuinely startled to hear actual, unvarnished desperation in the voice of Preston Hayes. Just come to one meeting. Talk to us. Talk to Jessica. Name your terms. Whatever you want, Eleanor. Anything. I paused, thinking. I thought about Jessica, sitting resolute in that hostile conference room, fiercely defending me when I wasn't even there to defend myself. I thought about all the late nights, the missed dinners, the sacrifices I'd made for Zenith. While Victoria presumably networked at exclusive cocktail parties, I thought about the constant, subtle digs about my MSU education. The promotions that inexplicably went to less qualified individuals with more prestigious pedigrees, the relentless, exhausting need to prove myself over and over and over again, year after year. I'll think about it, Mr. Hayes, I finally said, not quite ready to slam the door completely shut, wanting to keep my options open. Perhaps enjoying his discomfort just a little too much. But let me be perfectly clear. In the meantime, you should understand that Jessica Morales is a woman of immense integrity. If she says the deal depends entirely on my personal involvement, then believe me, it absolutely does. I hung up the phone before he could utter another pleading word, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The phone rang again instantly, Hayes, no doubt, but I silenced it, letting it go straight to voicemail. Then, a new text message notification popped up. It was from Jessica. Ellie. These Zenith people are absolutely unbelievable. Just got the full story out of Hayes. He actually admitted it. They fired you. After everything you did to land this Keystone account, I am beyond furious right now. Call me ASAP. We need to talk strategy. A genuine smile spread across my face despite the lingering anger and turmoil. Classic Jessica. I hit dial immediately. Ellie, she exclaimed the moment she answered, her voice crackling with righteous indignation. What the absolute hell happened over there? Why didn't you tell me they let you go? Honestly. I admitted, sinking back into the sofa cushions, part of me just wanted to see what they'd say when you asked where I was. Whether they'd actually own up to their decision or try to spin some corporate garbage to hide it. Oh, they tried to spin. Jessica scoffed. Major garbage about strategic restructuring and evolving talent needs and synergistic vision alignment. But I wasn't buying a word of it. The sheer arrogance of these people, Ellie. As if I wouldn't immediately notice you were gone. As if you weren't the entire linchpin of this deal. Thank you for standing up for me like that, Jessica, I said quietly, genuinely touched by her fierce loyalty. You really didn't have to put yourself on the line. Of course I did, she retorted instantly, indignant at the suggestion. Are you kidding? You're my friend. Besides, she added, her tone shifting slightly, becoming more businesslike. You are the only reason Keystone seriously considered Zenith Systems in the first place. Their SCO suite isn't even definitively the best technical solution on the market, frankly. But you, Ellie, you convinced me, you convinced my board, that you could personally make it work seamlessly for our unique operational needs. Our trust was in you, not in Zenith. I hesitated for a beat before asking the question that had been hovering anxiously in the back of my mind all morning. So, what happens now with the contract, Jessica? Does Keystone walk away completely? Jessica's voice immediately took on that sharp, decisive, no-nonsense tone I remembered so well from our intense late-night study sessions back in college. the tone she used when she'd made up her mind about something important. "Well, Ellie," she said, "that depends entirely on you. If you want me to tell Preston Hayes and Zenith Systems to take their SCO suite and shove it, I will walk away from this deal completely, right now. Without a second thought. We have other options. But," she paused dramatically, "I have another idea. Something potentially much more interesting, if you're up for it." My curiosity piqued. "I'm listening, Jessica." "You remember Marcus Thorne?" she asked. "He was maybe a year or two ahead of us at MSU, brilliant guy, engineering track I think, dropped out to start his own software company?" "Vaguely," I replied, trying to place the name amidst the blur of thousands of fellow students. "The name sounds familiar." "Well, he founded Momentum Software about 5 years ago," Jessica continued. "They're a direct competitor to Zenith Systems, based right here in Chicago, but much more agile. Much more innovative in their approach to supply chain tech. Honestly, their platform is probably superior. They've been trying relentlessly to get a serious meeting with me at Keystone for months." I sat up straighter on the sofa, my mind instantly racing, immediately seeing exactly where she was going with this. The pieces started clicking into place with dizzying speed. "Marcus is actively looking for a new VP of Strategic Accounts," Jessica continued, her voice brimming with enthusiasm now. "Someone who deeply understands the logistics software space, has established connections in the industry, and knows how to close complex enterprise deals." She paused for effect. "Sound like anyone you know, Ellie Vance?" My breath caught in my throat. You want me to go work for a direct competitor?" "For Momentum?" I asked, the possibilities swirling in my head, audacious, terrifying, and incredibly appealing all at once. "I want you to interview with them," Jessica clarified quickly. "Talk to Marcus. See what you think of him, the company, their vision. What happens after that initial conversation is entirely up to you and Marcus, of course. But yes," she confirmed, the excitement evident in her voice, "if you did happen to take the job at Momentum, and if their SCO suite truly meets Keystone's rigorous technical requirements, well, then Keystone Logistics would be very interested indeed in discussing a major partnership with Momentum Software." The strategy unfolded in my mind, sharp and clear. I could jump ship to a nimble, innovative competitor. I could potentially bring the massive Keystone Logistics contract, the very contract Zenith had just fumbled so spectacularly, along with me. I could demonstrate to Preston Hayes, Victoria Sinclair, and the entire complacent hierarchy at Zenith exactly what, and who, they had so foolishly thrown away. It wasn't just revenge, it was the perfect revenge. Professional, clean, utterly devastating, and completely ethical. "Okay," I decided, the hesitation vanishing, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and resolve. "Send me Marcus Thorne's contact information, Jessica. I'll reach out to him today." "Already texted it to you, Ellie," Jessica replied smugly, and I could practically hear the triumphant smile in her voice. "He's expecting your call. Go get M." 3 hours later, I found myself sitting across a small table in a trendy, bustling downtown Chicago cafe, a quick Amtrak ride up from Columbus, face to face with Marcus Thorne, the founder and CEO of Momentum Software. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, dressed in smart business casual, exuding the restless, infectious energy of someone passionately building something meaningful from the ground up. There was none of the stuffy corporate formality I'd grown accustomed to at Zenith. "Jessica Morales speaks incredibly highly of you, Eleanor," Marcus said warmly after we'd exchanged initial pleasantries and ordered coffees. His handshake had been firm, confident. "She told me you're hands down the most client-focused, results-driven account manager she's ever had the pleasure of working with." High praise coming from her. "I believe that building strong, trusting relationships is ultimately more valuable than any single transaction," I replied honestly, feeling more relaxed than I had in days. Technology evolves constantly, market dynamics shift, but genuine trust is the bedrock of sustainable business. We spent the next hour engaged in a stimulating, wide-ranging conversation, discussing his vision for Momentum Software, my deep experience in the supply chain optimization space, the evolving challenges and opportunities within the logistics technology market. It felt less like an interview and more like a meeting of minds. Crucially, unlike my initial interviews at Zenith Systems years ago, or any subsequent performance review, Marcus never once asked about my educational background, where I went to school, or what letters followed my name. His focus was entirely, refreshingly, on my tangible experience, my strategic approaches, my proven results, and my ideas for the future. "So, here's the situation, Eleanor," he finally said, leaning forward conspiratorially, his eyes sparkling with intensity. "Momentum Software is definitely a smaller player than old-guard Zenith Systems right now, no question. But we're nimble, we're hungry, and we're growing incredibly fast. Our core technology platform is objectively superior, it's fully cloud-native, far more adaptable to client needs, offers a much more intuitive user interface, and delivers demonstrably better ROI. What we lack," he admitted frankly, "is someone with your specific expertise and industry credibility. Someone who can effectively open doors and get us in front of the right major enterprise clients. Someone with established relationships and deep industry knowledge." I nodded, understanding immediately. "Exactly," he confirmed. "So, I'll be blunt, Eleanor." He grinned. "I want to poach you. I want to offer you the position of Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Momentum Software. You'd report directly to me, have full autonomy over building out your client acquisition strategy, receive meaningful equity in the company, and—" he paused for emphasis, "earn a base salary that will make Zenith's best counteroffer look utterly insulting." My eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. He wasn't kidding. "That's quite a compelling pitch, Marcus." He shrugged casually, though his eyes remained fixed on mine. "I believe in investing decisively in top-tier talent. And from everything Jessica has told me about your skills, your integrity, and your recent, availability, you are exactly the kind of transformative talent we need to take Momentum to the next level." He leaned back in his chair. "The fact that Zenith Systems was apparently stupid enough to let you walk away right when you landed them the biggest deal in their history? Well, that's entirely their colossal loss, and potentially, my massive gain." For the first time since that humiliating Friday afternoon meeting, a genuine, unforced smile spread across my face, wide and full of relief. "I have to admit, Marcus, I really like your approach. So," he pressed gently, "when would you need to give me an answer?" He raised an eyebrow playfully. "How about right now?" he challenged, a twinkle in his eye. I laughed, a real, hearty laugh this time. "I appreciate the enthusiasm, Marcus, truly. But I am definitely going to need to see the formal offer in writing first. Though," I added, meeting his gaze directly, "I have to admit, I am definitely, extremely interested." "Fair enough," he conceded with a nod. "Completely understandable. I'll have the official offer package emailed over to you by the end of the business day today." He stood up then, extending his hand across the small table. "I'm genuinely looking forward to the possibility of working together, Eleanor. I think we could do great things." As we shook hands firmly, my phone, lying face down on the table, buzzed insistently with yet another incoming call from Preston Hayes. Without even looking at the caller ID, I reached over and decisively silenced it. "Problem?" Marcus asked, noticing the gesture, his expression curious. A wave of certainty, calm and absolute, washed over me. "Not anymore," I replied, meeting his gaze with newfound confidence. "Not anymore at all." By the time I arrived back home at my Columbus apartment that evening, emotionally drained but exhilarated, I had accumulated 7 more missed calls from various Zenith Systems executives. 3 increasingly desperate voicemails pleading for just one more meeting. And a pathetically sycophantic email from Victoria Sinclair herself that was almost comically desperate in its transparent attempt at reconciliation. I deleted them all without a second thought, clearing the slate. Then, I opened the email attachment containing the formal offer package from Marcus Thorne and Momentum Software. The compensation details made me gasp out loud. The base salary was nearly double what I had been making at Zenith. The equity stake was significant, offering real potential for long-term wealth creation. There was a substantial signing bonus and even a generous relocation allowance should I choose to move to Chicago. But most importantly, more valuable than any dollar figure, was the title of VP of Strategic Accounts, and the clearly defined authority and autonomy that came with it. The respect I signed the digital documents immediately, without hesitation, and emailed the executed agreement back to Marcus. My next call was to Jessica. "It's done," I told her the moment she answered, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "I accepted the offer from Momentum. I start next Monday." "Perfect," she replied, pure satisfaction resonating in her voice. "Absolutely perfect timing, Ellie. Because I just finished emailing Preston Hayes, formally withdrawing Keystone Logistics from all contract discussions with Zenith Systems. Effective immediately." My eyes widened. "Wow. How did they take it?" Jessica let out a sharp laugh. "Like they'd been simultaneously hit by a truck and struck by lightning." Hayes actually sputtered something incoherent about potentially exploring legal action against Keystone for breach of verbal agreement. I snorted dismissively. "On what possible grounds? You never signed a single binding document." "Exactly what I pointed out to him," Jessica confirmed smugly. Very calmly, of course. I also happened to mention, just in passing, that Keystone is now actively exploring other potential software partners whose strategic direction and company values might better align with our own. I grinned, anticipating her next line. "Let me guess, you already have a meeting scheduled with Momentum Software next week?" "Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. sharp," Jessica replied, practically purring with satisfaction. "And I thought, since you'll technically be on their payroll by then, you might want to sit in on the presentation. Maybe offer your expert insights on how Momentum's SEO suite could be tailored for Keystone's needs?" I laughed again, feeling lighter, freer, more optimistic than I had in months, possibly years. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Jessica." "Absolutely not." The subsequent months unfolded like a perfectly executed masterclass in professional karma. I started my new role as VP of Strategic Accounts at Momentum Software the following Monday. Diving headfirst into the challenges and opportunities with renewed enthusiasm and a clear sense of purpose. Marcus Thorne proved to be a supportive, empowering leader, giving me the freedom and resources to build my team and define our enterprise client strategy from the ground up. Entirely free from the suffocating bureaucracy and stifling internal politics I'd constantly battled at Zenith Systems. My very first official act in my new role was, fittingly, to meticulously prepare for the upcoming Keystone Logistics presentation. When Tuesday morning arrived, I walked into the Momentum Software conference room, bright, modern, buzzing with energy, not with nervousness, but with quiet confidence. I greeted Jessica with a warm, genuine hug before seamlessly transitioning into leading a compelling presentation showcasing Momentum's superior technology and client-centric approach. 2 hours later, we had the firm framework of a new agreement. $40 million over 4 years, slightly less overall value than the original Zenith proposal due to a shorter term, but offering Keystone significantly better technology, a more flexible implementation plan, and dedicated expert support led by someone they already trusted implicitly, me. Word travels exceptionally fast in the relatively small world of supply chain technology. When the news inevitably broke that Keystone Logistics, Zenith's seemingly guaranteed prize, had abruptly reversed course and signed a major deal with the upstart competitor Momentum Software instead, other major enterprise clients took immediate notice. My phone started ringing off the hook, not with desperate pleas from my former employer, but with calls from valuable industry contacts I had carefully cultivated over my 6 years at Zenith. They were all curious, intrigued, wanting to know why Eleanor Vance had made such a sudden, dramatic switch, and more importantly, what Momentum Software could offer that the established giant Zenith couldn't. I never once spoke negatively about Zenith Systems or my former colleagues in those conversations. I didn't have to. My move, coupled with Keystone's decision, spoke volumes on its own. The facts were stark and undeniable. Zenith Systems had inexplicably fired their high-performing senior account manager immediately after she had single-handedly landed the largest contract in their company's history. They then subsequently lost that very same contract the moment the client discovered the key relationship manager was gone. It became a quiet, cautionary tale whispered among executives at industry conferences. A stark example of how arrogance and valuing pedigree over performance could lead to disastrous consequences. About 3 months into my tenure at Momentum, thriving in the dynamic environment, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message request. It was from Dan Carter. His message was brief and to the point. Victoria Sinclair was let go yesterday. Official reasons cited by the board, the Keystone disaster and a demonstrated failure to retain key talent. Just thought you'd want to know. A fleeting moment of grim satisfaction flickered through me, quickly followed by a pang of genuine concern for Dan and the other good people still trapped within the increasingly toxic atmosphere at Zenith. How are things over there, Dan? I typed back carefully. Are you okay? His reply came almost instantly. Tense. Really tense. Zenith stock is down nearly 30% since the Keystone news broke. Persistent rumors of significant layoffs coming soon. I felt no urge to celebrate Zenith's misfortune. Their downfall brought me no joy, only a quiet sense of vindication. Instead, I sent Dan another message, extending a lifeline. If you're considering a change, Dan, know that Momentum is hiring. We value talent and results over pedigree here. Think about it. 2 weeks later, Dan Carter joined my rapidly expanding team at Momentum Software, bringing his diligence, client empathy, and deep technical knowledge with him. He was the first of several talented, disillusioned Zenith Systems employees who made the strategic switch to Momentum in the ensuing months. Drawn by our growing reputation, innovative culture, and my leadership. 1 year to the day after my unceremonious firing from Zenith Systems, Momentum Software had achieved staggering growth, increasing its annual revenue by over 150%. Our burgeoning client roster now proudly included 3 former flagship accounts previously held by Zenith Systems, including, of course, Keystone Logistics. My team, now 15 strong and still actively recruiting, was a vibrant, diverse mix of backgrounds, educations, and experiences, Ivy Leaguers working alongside state school grads, industry veterans mentoring ambitious newcomers, all united by their shared drive, collaborative spirit, and unwavering focus on client success. I had just wrapped up our quarterly strategic planning meeting, feeling energized by the team's innovative ideas, when my assistant informed me that Marcus wanted to see me in his office. I found him leaning back in his chair, reviewing the latest financial projection reports with a deeply satisfied expression on his face. The board meeting this morning went well, I take it? I asked, taking the seat opposite his desk. Marcus looked up, breaking into a wide grin. Extremely well, Eleanor. Beyond expectations, actually. We are officially on track to surpass Zenith Systems in total market share by the end of Q3. That's significantly ahead of our initial projections. It is, he confirmed, his gaze meeting mine directly. Largely thanks to you, your strategic vision, and the incredible team you've built here. He pushed a sleek, unopened folder across the desk towards me, which is precisely why I wanted to discuss this with you first, before the official announcement. Inside the folder was a draft press release. The headline announced my promotion to Chief Revenue Officer of Momentum Software, effective immediately. Marcus, I managed to say, genuinely surprised and deeply moved. I don't know what to say. He simply smiled. Say yes, Eleanor. You've more than earned it. You've completely transformed our entire sales organization, attracted top-tier talent away from our competitors, and personally landed major clients that Momentum couldn't even get a meeting with before you arrived. This is the next logical step. I smiled back, a genuine, heartfelt smile, thinking about how profoundly different this moment felt, this recognition, this respect, this opportunity, compared to my last interaction within the executive suite at Zenith Systems. Then yes, Marcus, I said, my voice clear and strong. Absolutely yes. Thank you. As I walked out of Marcus's office later that afternoon, the weight of the new title settling comfortably on my shoulders, I checked my phone and found a text message waiting from Jessica. Ellie. Have you seen the latest industry news about Zenith Systems? I hadn't yet. I typed back quickly. Been a busy day. A quick search on my phone brought up the relevant headlines from the major tech business journals. Zenith Systems had just announced a major, strategic restructuring, following 4 consecutive quarters of sharply declining revenue and significant client attrition. Preston Hayes was officially stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. The company, hemorrhaging value, was actively seeking a buyer, essentially putting itself up for sale. I felt no surge of joy, no triumphant gloating at their downfall. only a quiet, profound sense of professional vindication. They had made their choices. They had consistently valued pedigree over performance, prioritized superficial connections over genuine competence, favored polished appearances over tangible results. The free market, in its often brutal but ultimately efficient way, had simply corrected their fundamental mistake. That evening, walking through the bustling, open-plan Momentum Software office on my way out, I passed the framed Midwest State University diploma hanging proudly on the wall of my spacious new corner office. I paused for a moment, looking at it, and smiled. It served as a constant, quiet reminder. Success isn't ultimately defined by where you start, what school name is printed on your degree, or what arbitrary boxes society tries to put you in. It's about the value you create, the integrity you maintain, the resilience you show in the face of adversity. It's about where you choose to finish, and crucially, who you become along the challenging, rewarding journey.